Hello and welcome to Mastering CSS. My name is Mark Lassoff and this is the first episode in a series that's going to teach you to use the CSS style sheet language. CSS is the language of design. It allows us to make our digital documents, web pages, mobile apps look any way we choose. CSS can seem a little confusing at first, but as you master the different concepts available to you, you're going to learn to control exactly what your pages look like. I'm really glad you're joining us. Let's get started by taking a look at our first example. So I've created a very small web page here about Norwalk, Connecticut, which is where our office happens to be. And if you take a look, we've got our basic document structure with our doc type definition, our HTML container tag, the head tag, and inside the head I've got a title for our document, a little CSS. The body of our document, which has content that's displayed on the right, includes a heading 1 tag, a couple of paragraph tags, and an image of Norwalk, Connecticut itself. And if you look at the result in the browser window on the right, it looks okay. It's probably not something you'd want to show a client or the world in production. This is not something that's quite ready for the web. It needs style. So let's go ahead and add our first styles. There's actually 3 ways of adding styles to a document. The first is inline. In inline styles, we're actually adding the style attribute to the tag and then putting our style sheet information in the value of that attribute. Let me show you. So I'm going to use the style attribute, and the value of the style attribute, where my cursor is flashing right now, is going to be our style sheet information. So let's say color, blue. When I do that and I save, you'll notice that the content of the H1 tag turned blue. Let's go ahead and add a style to our first paragraph tag. Style. Let's do something other than color this time. Let's do font family, and let's choose the font family Arial. So you can see here in our web browser, the result is we now have Arial text here in the first paragraph. Now this gets a little bit awkward because now I'd have to go and set the style individually in every tag that we have. That's of course not optimum, right? Because complex documents can have hundreds or even thousands of individual tags, and you don't want to have to go and set style rules for each one. I will tell you though that one place where you're going to need to use inline styles like I'm demonstrating right now is if you're doing HTML emails. And that's because the other 2 methods of applying CSS don't work when you're using an HTML email. So it is important to keep it in mind, but it's not the primary way you're going to want to apply CSS to your documents. Let's take a look at the second way. Let's get rid of our inline styles here because those are not the optimal way to do this. And you can see here, even editing inline styles causes a problem because you have to go line by line and edit each style. Very hard to keep these consistent. So styles in the head is the second way we would create style sheets. So you'll notice I put an opening and a closing style tag in the head of the document. So now I'm going to put all my styles here. Let's break the style down a little bit. So for this style, I'm going to use the selector H1. The selector, quite simply, determines which HTML elements the style will apply to. For right now, we're simply going to use the names of those elements, H1, paragraph, etc., in order to identify where we want to apply the styles. However, later on, in a later episode, I'm going to show you more complex selectors that are really quite powerful. But we're going to keep it pretty simple for right now. All right, so here's our H1. Let's add a different style this time. Before we styled it as blue, this time let's make the color And you'll notice here, by the way, this list of colors is being generated by the development environment that I'm using. I'm using a development environment called Brackets. Brackets is free. It's developed from Adobe. You can get it at brackets.io. I'm going to go ahead and color this fire brick. And now when I save, you'll see that this is fire brick red. We've got our paragraphs to style as well. Now you'll note it when I did inline styles, I had to go ahead and create separate style rules for each paragraph. But by using the paragraph selector, I'm going to be able to create style rules that apply to each and every paragraph. So let's go ahead and set the font size to 14 points, a little bigger than normal. Let's set the font family to Arial again. And now this is looking a little bit better. It's not just text in which we set style rules, however. We also can set style rules on images. So I'm going to use the IMG, or image selector, to create some rules around the image. So here we go, IMG. And let's go ahead for our image. Let's say float right. Notice when I do that, the image aligns itself nicely on the right-hand side of our web page, and the text automatically flows around it. In fact, if I compress the web page a little bit, you can see that the text continues to flow around it. So that styles the image, but I want to do a couple more things here. If you look, the space between the image and the text is very tight, right where my cursor is. That's a little bit hard on the eyes. So let's go ahead and add to our image a little bit of padding. So we're on the left-hand side of the image where we want to add the padding. So I'm going to use the padding left rule. And let's add 10 pixels with 10px. So now there's some nice space there, and this is easier on the eyes. So anytime we want to style something with CSS, we have our selector. And again, the selector selects which HTML elements are going to be styled. We then have our style rules, which include a rule float and a value right. A rule padding left and a value 10 pixels. Every CSS style is comprised of these three parts. Let's do a little more to our image. I'm going to choose visibility hidden. And you notice the image disappears. Some style rules do some unexpected things, but this can be useful if you want to make elements appear or disappear during the life of your application. So sometimes changing CSS styles can change the actual application state. Let's put it back. Let's make visibility visible. And let's just add a quick border around it. Let's do a 1 pixel wide black border that's solid. And here you can see we've got a little problem because of the padding right there, right? So let's change the padding left to margin left. And you can see this looks pretty good, a lot different than when we started. It's now readable, the font is more pleasing, and the text flows around the image. So we've done a lot of work with our style sheet. So again, this is the style sheet that fits in the head of our document. But there's one more place that you'll find style sheets, and I would argue this is the best place to put them. I'm going to create a brand new document, and I'm going to immediately save it in the same folder as my HTML, just on my desktop. I've called the folder CSS, and I'm going to save this as styles.css. So this document is going to be my CSS document. I'm going to go ahead and grab all the styles from my HTML using cut, paste them in my CSS, and I'm going to eliminate the style tags. So I now have one file that's got my CSS called styles.css, and one file that's got my HTML called HTML content. Let's save it. So now notice when I saved, all the CSS styling has disappeared from my web page. The reason for that is it doesn't know about the external styles in the CSS file. So we're going to have to link the two. Ironically, that's done with the link tag. So let's add that to our head, link, and we've got to say exactly what this is. So we're going to use rel style sheet. The relationship to the link is a style sheet, and the hypertext reference, or href, is to styles.css. Now, by the way, don't get the link tag confused with a hypertext link in HTML. These are two totally different things with similar names. And let's close that. Now when I save again, my styles will be loaded from the external style sheet page. Now there's a good reason to keep your styles external and in a separate file. If you have multiple pages in your website or multiple screens within a mobile application, you're wanting them to obviously look consistent. You want to have some branding. You want them to look similar fonts, similar sizes, etc. So that can be accomplished by attaching all of your documents to the same external style sheet. The second benefit is if you make a single change to the style sheet, all of the elements on all of your pages will be affected. Otherwise, you'd have to go page by page and change your styles that are in the head of each individual HTML document or your styles that are in line. All right, so that's about it for our first episode of Mastering CSS. Hope you've been able to keep up so far. Now it's time to turn to your course guide and go through the course guide and complete the episode 1 exercises. Thanks so much for watching. For Framework Television, my name is Mark Lassoff. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.